I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I feel like I'm on top of the world.
Disclaimer, you will not be transported to the top of the world. In the unlikely event you find yourself at the Arctic Circle, seek shelter from the elements immediately to avoid frostbite and or hypothermia. Geico will not be responsible if you find yourself in a cave or crevasse with a lonely abominable snowman, who in all likelihood will force you to play games including but not limited to Go Fish, charades, Chinese checkers, or his personal favorite, Red Rover, send Yeti on over. Geico is not liable for any damages, either physical or emotional.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Glad you're with us on this Tuesday morning. Trey Wingo, Mike Golick. Golick and Wingo presented by Progressive Insurance. And all phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Those were the words of Bruce Arians to his Cardinals team after their unbelievable win in Seattle, the last-second win with a field goal, where he announced it was his last ever game, retiring at the age of 65 and 5 years as a head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. He'll join us in a little bit.
I look forward to that. Greeny and I sat down with him a couple of years ago in Arizona, and what a great guy to talk to. I mean, just an incredible guy. Forget just about coaching, but just about life, and on his staff, the age of some of the coaches that he has, is incredible. The experience.
Absolutely. Louis Riddick also with us in studio, and we'll get to Bruce in a little bit. But while Louis is here, we want to talk about obviously all the coaching moves that have gone on. Louis, is there one coaching position right now that you think might be the best out of all the available ones? Obviously, with the Colts, you have Andrew Luck there. With Cleveland, you have the first and the fourth pick. With the Giants, you have a legacy of what that franchise has been over the years, even though it stumbled this year. Do you see one job as better than the other?
Yeah, those are all great points that you make right there, Trey. And everybody would be attracted to different organizations for different reasons, but I think if you just look at it objectively and what some teams have in place already, I mean, you'd have to say either Detroit or Oakland are the two that people would be very excited to go ahead and get into because, one, of the quarterbacks and the relative youth that they have at that position. Two, with the Raiders, you have a lot of investment on the offensive line, especially at the center and the two guard positions. They need a tackle. They have perimeter playmakers. They have the makings of a decent run game. They really need a bell cow running back. And on the defensive side, you have to take care of Khalil Mack. You need to get some good linebacker play, and you need some corners. But I think the Oakland is set up nice. Detroit set up nice, too, obviously, with Matthew Stafford. They tried to invest in the offensive line. They need to find, they had Barry Sanders, for goodness sake, at one point in time. Find a running back who you can really say, look, if we need to, we can give it to you 25, 30 times. Because Matthew can't do it by himself. And on defense, take care of Ziggy Ansah. You have Darius Slay. Right. So there's a lot of great things. You have great ownership, great stadium, and in a division that's winnable. So I think those two divisions in particular, but all of them have, look, the Giants, it's one of the proudest franchises in the National Football League. They have a lot of work to do, but it's such a great legacy franchise that, man, and the Browns, all those draft picks, I mean, in cap space, it's all of them have their pluses for sure.
In the bigger picture of things, if the reports end up being true and Gruden does go to Oakland, and I'm always for anybody getting all the money they can. If it's $10 million, great. But the ownership part, and take Gruden out of this, I make this a general question. Is that a slippery slope when you start giving a head coach stock in it? Now, first, it has to be approved by the other owners, and I would be stunned if that happened. But do you see it starting to go down that road? I mean, what kind of idea that would be?
I don't know if that's going to be a trend or not. I mean, that's what it tells you though is, and I think we've seen that this year, Mike, and is just how important and how much of a value people are placing on getting the guy that they want if they really do believe in it, because they believe that that's where it all starts. And if they have to go that far with it in order to entice the right person to come and coach for you, that they're willing to go that way. Look, and I circle back and I say this, I've said this numerous times. The difference between the LA Rams of 2016 and 2017 has to start with the discussion of what has Sean McVay done there that wasn't being done before.
Right.
How did he, when you talk about culture change and a mindset change, that guy literally went in there and kind of rebooted everyone's brain into thinking you're not perennial losers anymore. Todd Gurley, you are an MVP type quarterback. Jared Goff, you are worth the first pick in the draft. And I'll tell you, if you really believe that this is the guy, if it means giving him partial ownership, whatever it takes, I think from a business standpoint, I don't know if it's something that is sustainable.
Right.
If other owners are going to be willing to do that.
Sure.
But look, Mark Davis obviously believes very strongly, if this winds up being part of the deal, that John is the guy who can reboot that organization too and get it back going in the same direction it was when he was there the first time, which was in the right direction.
It certainly was. By the way, to your point about the Lions, they've gone 68 games without a 100-yard rusher.
That's incredible.
The last one
was
Reggie Bush.
That's almost as bad as going 1-31.
And it never maybe not quite that bad.
No, you're right.
They have been in the playoffs.
I'm just saying relatively speaking.
Yeah, it's not great.
No, I got you.
Then the issue that came out yesterday I thought was really interesting. Ted Thompson, the GM of the Packers, is no longer the GM of the Packers.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be reassigned. Your thoughts on what's going on there?
Yeah, every time everybody's time comes to an end, and the Packers have a lot of people in their personnel department who have been there a long time, who are highly respected, who were trained in the quote-unquote Ron Wolf, Ted Thompson Packer way. And I think, maybe Mark Murphy and the people who are up there right now just feel as though it's time to kind of usher in a new wave of thinking. The Packers have kind of, they've kind of stalled out a little bit from a roster building perspective. I mean, they still have the great Aaron Rodgers, but the secondary has continued to be a problem. The offense has kind of stagnated outside of Aaron Rodgers' development, outside of his big playmaking ability. And maybe they just think it's time for a new voice there. And it's, I think the league needs some new, fresh ideas. Ted has had a long run. He's had a long, great, successful run.
From the standpoint of hiring head coaches, what should the time process be? I know it can be tough if you're looking at a guy who's in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But it's not just the head coach, it's the assistants he's going to go for. Is one guy going to go for multiple assistants that another guy might go for? So how should the timing be working here?
Yeah, obviously I think the quicker, the more prepared you are heading into it, Mike, and having an idea and an outline of who you want to go after, the better. I mean, obviously,
should a guy, if he was sitting down with you, a head coach interview, should he have that list ready to show you? This is who
I'm trying to get.
Right,
absolutely. Right. And you can't, and you have to have, just like you would do in free agency, whereas if you don't get coach A or player A, you have to have B and C already lined up. And quite honestly, look, it's not something that necessarily, people would be happy about, but you have to have been thinking about this for quite a while now and have put the bug in people's ear for a while now that, look, if I am able to get in this position, are you willing to come and are you willing to have me contact your employer and say, look, we're trying to get you? So yeah, as organized as you can be, January is a very, very busy month, for front offices. So on top of the fact that they're trying to get ready for the Senior Bowl and the Combine and all the other All-Star games and make a lot of decisions, look, the coach, whoever they hire, has to be ready to roll.
All right, so that obviously is going to be something that's going forward. And we could still have another opening. We don't know what's going on with Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati. They're going to take a few days and try and figure that one out, although Adam Schefter was reporting that it looks like Marvin was thinking about moving on. Then there's the Wild Card Weekend we got coming up. Yeah. And the great story, obviously, was the Buffalo Bills and making it into the postseason after that 17-year drought, longest active drought of any major sport in North America.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the Bills, because they haven't been enjoying this a lot, and they should.
Yeah.
How do we make that transition now to, okay, hey, it's great we're there, but we have a game to play, and it's going to be a very tough one against a very difficult Jacksonville team.
No question. Yeah, I think if anybody knows Sean McDermott, he'll turn them pretty quick. He'll get their attention pretty quick. He got their attention very quickly this year in his first year as a head coach. So, and I think they have some great assistants on that staff who have been in postseason play before. David Culley comes to mind, an offensive assistant coach who was a great wide receiver coach for the Philadelphia Eagles, who was there with Sean as well. So I think they understand that, look, the euphoria of getting in is great, but you're right. They are going into an absolute hornet's nest now as far as this defense that they're going to face here that can really, I think, poses their offense in particular a very, very bad matchup.
Especially if they don't have Shady McCoy. Hopefully his ankle will be ready to
Right.
go. We'll see how that plays out later on in the week. But now we want to bring in someone. We're delighted to have him on the show today. He is now actually the former Cardinals head coach. Bruce Arians joins us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Bruce, first of all, thanks so much for being with us. Is it weird to hear yourself introduced as the former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals now?
Yeah, that really is. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it was a very emotional day yesterday, but kind of calm this morning.
Well, what was it, Bruce, that we saw the clip of you talking to your team? Obviously, this was something you knew and thought about going into the game. What was it that made you come to the conclusion after a pretty successful run there in Arizona?
Really, it was all about family. You know, I said yesterday, my wife turned to me this summer and said, you know, Jake's going to be 40 this year. And I mean, it hit me so hard that how the hell could he be 40? And it was, I don't know, it was all about family. Really, it really was. My wife is real a trooper, man. I mean, what she's gone through as a head coach's wife, and she had enough, and I had enough.
When did you know? When this year, this game, the 2 games in before the season started, that it was going to be the end?
I wasn't really sure. You know, all the plans were for her to go ahead and move back to as she puts our forever home, and I was going to stay here and coach another year. And until
it looks like we may have just lost Bruce there. Hopefully we'll get him back in just a second.
Yeah.
But you know, he's an interesting guy, and you know, he has his life philosophy is you know, no risk it, no biscuit, which I love.
He's a great guy to talk to, but I've talked to other coaches as well, and they reminisce and look back on the beginning of their career, and then when they get toward the end, of how much they've missed a family.
Right.
And there's just no way around it. I mean, with that coach's lives and the number of moves, do you have to go ahead while the wife and the kids, depending on if they're in school or not, have to stay behind?
Yeah, and thankfully we got Bruce back. So, Bruce, apologies, we lost you there for a second in your train of thought there. So, the new frontier for you is what? Because you have been a guy who's been all about the game and been very successful everywhere you've been with the game. How is this transition going to work for you?
Yeah, I'm kind of anxious to find out. I know I won't be totally retired. Thinking about possible what I could do in the media and learn and start a new career there, and just wait and see what opportunities are out there. And you know, I know that I don't want to be a consultant or any of those type of things. I'll eventually visit the Jets training camp this year and hopefully the Cardinals training camp and have some fun.
Well, listen, we'd love to have you. So if you're in the media, we're always looking for people, Bruce. I'm just letting you know. We're always looking for folks at the Worldwide Leader. Little colder here than it is in Arizona right now, so just be prepared.
Yeah, I got a hell of a workout walking across that campus this summer.
Yeah, you will. Bruce Arians talking to us, the former Cardinals head coach. You know, looking at your, and this is with most coaches, it's incredible because you talked about, you know, and I've worked with so many coaches who have talked about when they look back on it, the time at times they've missed with their family or how the years go by and all of a sudden the kids are grown, just like you said. All of a sudden you realize your son, there's no way he can be 40 years old. I'm looking at, you know, you went to Virginia Tech. Your start into coaching was a GA in 75, and then the stops that you went to, 14 different places throughout. Some you went back to the same place, but still a move to go back there. If some young 20-year-old, 22-year-old came up to you and said, Coach, I am so interested in getting into coaching right now. This is what I want to do. This is my passion that I want to do with my life. What would be the best words of wisdom you could give them?
The best words I ever got from our equipment manager at Virginia Tech. So you really want to coach? Build your house on wheels.
That's exactly right, because it will be mobile. And you know,
but it's the greatest profession in the world. I don't think there's anything better to build relationships. I mean, quality relationships that last your entire life than coaching. And the bond you make with your players, your fellow coaches. There's no better profession, and there's no better profession than keeping you young than coaching.
That's interesting, as Bruce Arians is with us, because so many people talk about how much it wears them down. Yeah, but you're right, being around those young players obviously puts you in a different frame of mind. And, you know, we talk a lot about Bruce these days, quarterback whisperers, guys that have worked really well with quarterbacks and parlayed that into success. You might be the ultimate quarterback whisperer when you look at the guys that you've been able to work with over your career. Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, in the last few years, Carson Palmer, in Arizona, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some other ones, but when you see those first names come to mind, and your book is The Quarterback Whisperer, by the way, what is it about the ability to talk to those guys and get them to buy into what you're teaching them that sort of makes the whole thing work?
You have to build a line of trust, and I don't think that comes in the office. I think it has to come off the field, and really becoming I never wanted to be a big brother or a second father. I always wanted to be a cool uncle you want to have a drink with. And you build that relationship so that when you speak to each other, you're telling the truth. You're not telling me what you think I want to hear. You're telling me what you're really seeing out there on the field.
Who were the guys your first after you were a GA at Vatech from 75 to 77? The first, when you were wide receivers coach, running back coach, that's at Mississippi State. Started up in 1978, all the way through to where you are now. Who were the guys you looked to when you started your coaching career as trying to maybe mold yourself after, or who influenced you?
Oh gosh, by far, Jimmy Sharp and John Devlin. Jimmy Sharp was my third head coach at Virginia Tech, and he had been Coach Bryant's offensive coordinator for 10 years, and it was a very young head coach. But we were a bunch of ragamuffins, man. I was a quarterback, and I was bigger than center and right guard, and we're running the wishbone. And every game that we went out there, we really believed we were going to win because of his positive influence on us every day. John Devlin, I wouldn't be anywhere without John Devlin. I got kicked out of high school, and everybody that was recruiting me dropped me, and Coach Devlin stayed with me and got that scholarship to Virginia Tech, and it was a few years later that I was able to repay that debt and hire him as my assistant head coach at Temple.
Well, listen, it certainly has worked out for you, and I'm glad that Coach Devlin believed in you, and a lot of people now believe in you, Bruce, with the things that you've been able to do. Your life has been about coaching, but you had all kinds of. You were a bartender for a while, and it's sort of there's been a lot of things that sort of made you the person you were. What were some of the life stories that you could share with us that people may not know about some of the early days with you?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, back when I went to school, you got $15 a month for laundry money. That was the only money I had. My parents didn't have any money to send me to college with, and I worked as a bartender the entire time I was in school for $1 an hour, and all I could eat and drink, and it was a hell of a job. Yeah. But when you sit across the bar from someone, I wanted to be a guidance counselor because I love reading people and listening to people, not talking to people, just listening. And you learn more about people as becoming a bartender than I think anything in the world.
You probably get 3 credits for that.
A lot of schools
doing that. So you take that. So your first head coaching job is 83 with Temple. Now I know it's college and pro, but you're still the head coach. The first time you're running a program. Today, I know you were an interim head coach with the Colts, but then the next head coaching job, pure head coaching, was with the Cardinals in 2013. So from 83 when you were first time head coach to 2013 when you were that head coach again, what were some of the biggest things you learned and maybe did differently from that head coaching point?
The biggest thing I learned from Temple, which it's amazing how close all those guys still are. I mean, when we come to Philly or Washington, I have 15 to 20 Temple guys. I can't wait to go to Cherry and White this year to see all those guys because they're so close. But I learned how to delegate. At Temple, I was the head coach, the quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, recruiting coordinator, fundraiser. And by 35, I was in the hospital twice a week. And literally almost killed myself with that job.
Wow.
And I learned to delegate. And then when Chuck got sick and I got the job at Indy to take over, I say, just everybody do your job. I'll just decide if we're going to go for it on 4th down. That's about it. I don't give big speeches on Saturday night. And those guys can testify to that. But just do your job. And I learned that if I ever got an opportunity, I could call plays, which I love to do. I would get out of the game if I had to give up play calling because that's the most fun in the business. And I said, this can be done. Trust your staff, trust your guys to do their job. And I think that goes with all businesses. Don't micromanage anymore.
Well, look, no one dialed up a lot of big plays better than you over the years, whether it was with Ben or Peyton or with Carson over the last few years. Speaking of that, one of those guys that you've counted on, as Bruce Arians is with us, talking about his recent decision to retire, someone else may be making that decision sooner rather than later, and that's Larry Fitzgerald. Look, he is an ageless wonder. He continues to produce at a very high level. Do you think he's coming back for one more year?
Yeah, I think it all depends who's the head coach. Who's calling the plays? Do they know how to? He can still play, and if the right person's there and knows how to get him to the game on Sunday, don't overwork him in the spring and training camp. because he can still play at a very high level. And the one thing I'll say about Larry, before you ever talk about him as a player, he's one of the greatest human beings I've ever known.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about that.
No doubt about that. Bruce, last one from me is, you've been in this game a long time. Do you enjoy the game of football the way it's being played today? What do you think of the game today?
Well, it's different. I think the quality of the game has dropped dramatically, technically. How to block, how to tackle, how to play football. But the quality of the athlete is so great, it's saving the game. And, line play is almost non-existent because they never get to practice. They never get to practice playing how to play an offensive line and defensive line anymore.
Well, you're right, and we see that a lot, especially with the draftees that come from that spread offense in the college game, where they're basically in a 2-point stance the entire time, as opposed to getting their hand in the dirt and trying to run people over. That has been a big shift, and that's something you can only work with what you got. Bruce Arians with us. Bruce, we appreciate you being with us. I want to let you go on this note. I don't think people know that you, not Michael Vick, have the single season record for most rushing touchdowns in Virginia Tech history. You had 11 in one year, and Michael Vick's best year was 9. That's got to be a feather in that Kango cap that you wear all the time, correct?
It's amazing. Steve Keim was talking to his kids the other day who are young football players. And, Coach still has a record, and Mike Vick couldn't break it. And they said, wow, Coach must have been really fast.
And I just ran the wishbone. Well, it's a different way to attack. But again, like the lineman.
Never handed off, never pitched inside the 10.
There you go. You were a big guy. You could bowl people over. Bruce, it was our pleasure to watch you coach, and we look forward to whatever's next for you. Thanks for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Bruce Arians, one of the best. One of the best.
And I tell you, you want to be a coach, and this is kind of a model of what you will see if you coach, especially for as long as he did. This is all his stops. Let me take a big breath. Virginia Tech, Mississippi State, Alabama, Temple, Kansas City Chiefs, Mississippi State, New Orleans, Alabama, Indianapolis Colts, Cleveland Browns, Pittsburgh Steelers, Indianapolis Colts, Arizona Cardinals.
Build your house on wheels. That's
all
what he
those
said.
stops, and as he said, as you just heard him say, the thing that got him the most, there's no way my son is turning 40.
Yep.
The realization of, wow, how time flies.
Same thing with Joe Gibbs. He leaned over to give his son a kiss, and he realized my son has a beard. When did that happen? Rolling through a Tuesday morning with you on Golick and Wingo. Glad you're with us. Trey Wingo and Mike Golick. We are on ESPN Radio and ESPN2, presented by Progressive Insurance. Tom Rinaldi's going to join us in just a few moments to talk about that epic showdown at the Rose Bowl between Oklahoma and Georgia. And because it happened at the Rose Bowl, Mike, it seems like we've had the best bowl games over the last 10 years, maybe.
Yeah,
this the Rose Bowl
game last night broke a record for points from last year's game,
right?
Which was this year was
the
102
USC Penn
points.
State game was crazy.
Last year was 101 points. So yeah, I mean that's pretty wild.
And then of course there was the 2005 national championship game between Vince Young and the Texas Longhorns against that USC team, which was loaded with Leinart, Bush, Lendell White, all those great players on that team as well.
Yeah, I agree. There's one thing, if I'm going to sit there and get a little technical on and listen, I love these guys, Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, what they did in running the ball last night and the yards they gained and the
total number.
They combined, I talked about the combined points, but Michel ran for 181 yards, Chubb ran for 145 yards. Georgia became the sixth team with multiple 100-yard rushers in a single Rose Bowl, the first since Oregon in 2012. But here's the thing. Most combined rush yards by teammates, duos in FBS history, is now Nick Chubb and Sony Michel at 8,284 yards. So they just passed Eric Dickerson and Craig James, 8,193 yards.
Which is great, but...
It's great, but... Now they count bowl games as in your official regular season stats. And obviously when Dickerson and James played, they did not do that. So to me, that's a little unfair.
Right.
To me, and you could easily do it, go back and if anybody played in bowl games, add their stats. Instead of saying that Nick Chubb and Sony Michel are now the top, go back and let's see. Dickerson and James, they play in a bowl game together. What did they rush for? What yards did they have? That should add to it Because that, to me, that's a little unfair.
Well, it is interesting because that's sort of there's a line in the sand that sometimes we cross with stats that doesn't make any sense. This would be one of those. The other one is when you talk about Super Bowls as opposed to NFL titles.
Right.
Okay? Because they're basically the same
There were
thing.
championships before the Super Bowl. They just named it.
It was just called something else. So when you talk about, the highest point total in Super Bowl history, Super Bowl 24, San Francisco 55, Denver 10. Yeah, but the 1941 NFL championship game was 73-0, the Bears over Washington. So while I get it, it wasn't called the Super Bowl, it was still the game to determine who the NFL champion was.
Right.
And that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly right. It's exactly right. People seem to forget about actual NFL championships. If it doesn't have Super Bowl and a number before it.
Yeah, a lot of football was played before 1967.
And again, it sounds like, it's old, taken away from it. I love what these guys are doing, but you have to admit, it's just not fair.
Right.
They have beaten Eric Dickerson and Craig James by less than 100 yards, and they didn't get to include their bowl games, and these guys do. So, I mean, I think I'm kind of stating the obvious. It just doesn't seem too fair.
It just seems like it's an easy fix.
I would completely agree with that.
Let's just go back, look at the bowls. I mean, what would prohibit someone from going back and just doing some math?
Yeah. That's all it is. And it's not difficult math.
And
it's
we're not
just
taking
addition.
away anything from Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. We're not doing that.
We are not. But it's simple addition for Dickerson and James. Are they really not still the best duo if they ran for more yards and include the bowl game?
Right.
I mean, come on.
Well, it's like the knock, how many Super Bowls have you won? Well, there's the Steelers have 6.
Yeah.
And the Cowboys and 49ers and Patriots all have 5. What about all the Packers?
Yeah,
NFL?
how many of the
include
Packers
with the NFL championships?
Yeah.
Which were just like literally 1 or 2 years before the Super Bowl.
Exactly right.
A lot of the same players were in the same thing.
It just wasn't called a Super Bowl.
They just didn't have a name for it.
Very true.
Point.
Very true.
But it was a fantastic game.
Yeah, listen, it was a great game. I'm looking forward to the national championship game. We're looking forward to being down there. This is going to be a team in Georgia. Again, they're a 4-point underdog. The Dogs are in this game. And I get it. I think Alabama should be favored. Georgia's going to want to run the ball, but it's very difficult to just line up and run the ball against Alabama. So they are going to need this true freshman. Again, when you start talking about a quarterback, when you say, last winter he was playing in some high school all-star game, and all that, you're like, wow. And what they've gone through and what he has been able to do through the year and how much it can be on his shoulders for this next game.
Well, we enjoyed watching it. And, of course, we're joined now on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line by someone who was there, our Tom Rinaldi. Tom, this game was epic to watch. What was it like to be on the field, especially in that second half, seeing Georgia rally from 17 down and then the whole thing go back and forth to double overtime?
It was incredible. One of my favorite moments actually happened back-to-back in the first half when after Oklahoma had scored its second touchdown, Baker Mayfield shouted to me on the sideline. I was on the OU sideline, guys, and he actually shouted, Tom, no one's ever done that at any sideline I've ever covered. He said, Tom, go and tell them good luck over there. Then they scored again. He shouted to me, did you go and tell them yet? Obviously, there weren't as many shouts in the second half, so many momentum swings. It was just absolutely an incredible game to witness and be on the sideline for.
So along those lines, and I get that in the beginning, and you were right there, and that's what we love. You can tell us what was going on the sideline.
It's a great story, by the way.
That is a great story, but then how was he in the third quarter when they were 3 and out, punt, and then lost the lead? What was the mood then?
Well, Golick, I think you can speak to this, and I'd be very curious. Certainly Mayfield downplayed it, but when you saw him get kneed in the back, there was no flag there shouldn't have been. The defender got pushed into him. I really think that shook him up for the rest of that series and the next series, and that was in the midst of the great momentum shift that we saw from Georgia. I thought that was a part of the game that maybe changed things more than was apparent for OU. But then the scoop and score, the momentum switched back, and you really thought, I know I did, 55 seconds to go, OU gets the ball back, they're going to get down at least at the field goal position and have a chance to score. But the Georgia defense made the key adjustments that we've seen Kirby Smart make when he was at Alabama, and that, of course, set us up and sent us into the 2 overtimes.
Absolutely. As Tom Rinaldi joins us on the phone, he was on the field for the Rose Bowl, and we appreciate him scooping out a few seconds for us as he's getting ready to fly somewhere. Tom, the other thing I thought was really interesting in that game is all the attention for a lot of reasons was on Baker Mayfield, a Heisman Trophy winner, a little controversial with some of the things that have happened around him. How's he going to play? But just watching the freshman, the true freshman for Georgia, Jake Fromm, handle that stage and do the things necessary to put his team in a position to win, that was maybe the story that might be most impressive in this game and the thing that people aren't talking about enough.
Trey, in the production meeting that happened before the game, Chris Fowler asked Fromm, when's the last time you were uncomfortable? And there was a lengthy pause in the room. And Fromm ultimately said, I really can't remember.
It's a good answer.
If that didn't manifest in the game, I don't know what else did. He was incredibly unflappable. I mean, just to stand on the sideline and go through the emotional swings was remarkable. Yet he was so flatlined, and I think he really takes that cue from his head coach. If you saw Kirby with Maria, right after the game was over, Kirby was very flatlined, which I thought was remarkable. But you saw Fromm make the checks at the line. His mastery of the offense, guys, for a true freshman, let alone his composure, shined and was a big reason why Georgia is going to play for the title.
Yeah, title against Alabama. So you just we have a week before it, but just quickly on that, you being around, these teams, what's kind of your instant first thought when you saw that was going to be the matchup?
Well, listen, my instant thought, to tell you the truth, is I kind of hope we don't get a game like we got the last time we had 2 SEC games in the title, right, which was Bama LSU. Simply because it was such a difficult game for LSU. They could barely get the ball past the 50. Obviously, we're going to hear a lot about, Saban and Smart, and we're going to hear a lot about master pupil. But to me, I think, and especially for you, Goal, like if you like play at the line of scrimmage, this is your game. I think you're really going to see a tremendous fight in the trenches in this football game. And there are going to be a couple of chunk plays that are going to decide it.
Well, we were talking about that earlier, right, because it was the defensive line of Alabama that just snuffed the life out of that Clemson offense, and that's what Georgia's offense likes to do, wear people down. So that's going to be the fun part going forward. Which line will wear the other one down first? Will it be the Alabama defensive front seven, or will it be the Georgia offensive line with so many of those big runs? Tom, we know you're busy. We know you're traveling. We appreciate you spending a few minutes with us this morning.
Thanks, Tom.
I just have to, guys, I have to really quickly just say, what a thrilling game. Just an incredible game to witness and be a part of. I hope it was as thrilling watching from the absolute bitter cold than it was from the beauty of Southern California. I had to get my shot in
The
there.
Fireplace was working, Tom.
Yeah,
we'll just leave it at that.
Thanks for that, Tom.
Travel safe, and
Thanks,
I hope
man.
you have an aisle seat now. All right, Tom Rinaldi with us.
He has a middle seat now.
Well, 15J's not bad.
Yeah. Listen, I thought it was very entertaining, but the former defensive player in me really, that was a tough one to watch from the defensive side of the ball.
Some linebacker adjustments that Oklahoma would like to have back. No question about it. All right, coming up, the one stat, the one that will tell you who's going to win the national championship game. That's next. Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2. Little Prince in the background for that one. And don't forget the Will Cain Show also debuts today on ESPN Radio and ESPN News from 3 to 6 p.m. as we are Golic and Wingo wrapping up a Tuesday morning. Okay, we sort of teased this. The one thing that will define the national championship game between Alabama and Georgia, we think.
Yes, we think. So here's the setup. Georgia head coach Kirby Smart was an assistant coach under Nick Saban at LSU in 2004 and at Alabama from 2007 to 2015. This will be the 12th meeting between Saban and a former assistant coach. The other 11 times, Saban is 11-0. Not only 11-0, but winning the game every one of those games by at least 14 points.
And let's break it down by assistant, okay? Former assistant Jim McElwain, 0-3 against Saban. Former assistant Derek Dooley, 0-3 against Saban. Former assistant Mark D'Antonio, 0-2 against Saban. Former assistant Will Muschamp, 0-2 against Saban. Jimbo Fisher, 0-1 against Saban. Does Kirby have the smarts to break that trend?
Well done. We will see. Listen.
It's really interesting when you lay it out like that.
Initially, I mean, right off the bat, I'm going with, and I don't know what's going to change my mind. I mean, we'll see with the injury, but I don't know if that's going to even do it with Anthony Jennings as well. I mean, we've seen them all play. I don't think a whole lot's going to change this week. I'm picking Alabama. I rarely will go against Alabama or New England.
You were proved right last night.
Yeah. I'm Alabama is a 4. Quite honestly, I thought they'd be a bigger spread. I was surprised. I'm not going to lie. I'm surprised it was only 4 points. And I'll mention it again. Alabama has been favored in 110 of their last 111 games. The one time they weren't was back in 2015, a game in Athens against Georgia.
So that's good news for Georgia.
They were a 1-point dog. Alabama won the game 38-10.
That's bad news for Georgia.
That's bad news for Georgia. So I am initially, and we have all week to talk about it, obviously, even up to, and we'll be in Atlanta doing the show from the stadium on Monday. I just think Alabama will be better. Georgia will not be able to just line up and run, even though they have 2 excellent backs and a really good offensive line. A lot's going to fall on the shoulders of the freshman Jake Fromm to back that defense off a little bit, prove that he can hit over the top a little bit, and give that running game a little bit of breathing room. We'll see if he can do it or not, but I look forward to the matchup. I don't care that it's SEC versus SEC. I'm tired of hearing all the people complaining and moaning about the fact there were 2 SEC teams in it. It's 13 people picking it. Don't blame the media. Don't blame, past outcomes. These are 13 individuals who made the choices, okay? They made these choices. To me, and I think you agree, you think the ratings are going to be just as good.
I think they'll be fine.
I think the ratings are going to be just fine. We're going to hear all kinds of people, I'm not watching anything, and then come Monday night, they're going to turn it on, and they're going to watch it to see what happens. I'm looking forward to the game. I don't care if it's 2 SEC teams.
Well, look, at the end of the day, we always talk, like, for example, in NCAA tournament, we love the upsets. Well, the year George Mason made it to the Final Four, no one watched.
Yeah, nobody watched.
We like upsets the first couple of weeks, and then we're like, give me chalk.
Yeah.
Give me Kansas. Give me Duke. Give me North Carolina. Give me those teams. So we can say, and look, maybe we'll be proven wrong, but I think history suggests we have a team like Georgia and Alabama in the title game people are watching.
I do think a lot of people wanted to see Baker Mayfield against Alabama and this Alabama defense because of just Baker and what he is able to do. So from that side of it, I think nationally there might be some disappointment that you're not going to get the Heisman Trophy winner against Alabama like you had last year. So we'll see. We'll see how this one goes. I like my early prediction is going to be Alabama.
Yeah, I'll hold off on my prediction until Monday in Atlanta. But the team that played better in the Rose Bowl won. That was the bottom. They made more plays. They made
did
the block on special teams, which they've done a bunch, and they cashed in a touchdown. So they did their job. We'll look forward to that. Lots more about the NFL coming up later on this week on Golic and Wingo. Thanks for watching and listening this morning. Adios.
Bye.